Hey everybody, it's TotalGamerJunkie and I welcome you all back to my channel. So here I am about to read chapter 1 of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I hope you'll enjoy. Runnels of water trickled across her cheeks. Behind closed eyes, she heard and saw it all again with vivid, terrible clarity. The line of Leonidas. Shamed, tarnished. 20 years was enough for some to forget their debts, to come to terms with their flaws or make peace with the past. Not for me, Cassandra whispered, the broken lantern in her hands reverberating. I think that's what the word is. She stabbed the weapon hard into the sand by her side and the memories faded. Her eyes peeled open slowly, adjusting to the bright glare of the spring morning. The cerulean waters hugging Kephalonia's eastern shores sparkled like a tray of jewels. The surf creamed in across the sand, fading to a gentle, cool gurgle that rolled up to where she sat and crept across her bare toes. The salt spray came in soft clouds, condensing on and cooling her skin. A squabble of gulls wheeled and screeched in the cloudless sky, while a cormorant plunged into the waters in an explosion of crystalline drops due east. Out near the hazy horizon, Athenian galleys moved in an endless train. They were like shades gliding across the twilight blue, deeper waters and into the Corinthian Gulf to aid the blockade of Megara. The bright sails billowed like the lungs of titans, and every so often the sea wind carried the groan of ropes and timbers and the throaty shouts of the many warriors on board. Earlier this year, Cephalonia itself had been subsumed into the Athenian sphere, as had most of the islands, and so the war grew like a canker. Some small voices inside her told her she should care about the colossal struggle that raged across Hellas, or Hellas, whatever, however you want to pronounce it, stirring the great cauldron of ideologies, bringing the once allied cities to each other's throats. But how could she? Proud of Athens she cared little for, and on the other side, unswerving Sparta. The mere presence of the word in her thoughts shattered the delicate ideal of the shore. She eyed the ancient half-spear of Leonidas askance, the winged iron head, the intricate workings around the tang, and the half-leg, half-worn and discolored from years of oiling. It had always seemed fitting to her that the one thing she had left from her broken past was a broken thing. A shrill screech pierced her thoughts, and she looked up to see the cormorant emerging from the waves with a silvery mackerel in its beak. But speeding down towards it came a spotted eagle. The cormorant screeched again in terror, dropped its semi-masticated prize, then plunged under the waves for cover. The eagle clawed at the discarded fish corpse, only for the morsel to slip under the waves too. With a mighty shriek of dismay, the great bird wheeled round and glided in towards the shore, settling with a gentle run across the sand. Coming to a halt beside Cassandra. She smiled despite herself, for the dance spear was not the only thing that remained of the past. We talked about this already, Icarus, she chuckled. You are to bring me mackerel to roast for my afternoon meal. Icarus stared at her, his buttercup yellow beak and keen eyes giving him the look of a disapproving old man. I see, she arched an eyebrow. It was the cormorant's fault. Her belly groaned, reminding her of the long hours since she had last eaten. With a sigh, she plucked the spear of Leonidas from the sand. For a moment, she caught sight of her dull reflection in the blade, broad of face with little humor in her hazel eyes, and a thick brand of russet hair hanging across her left shoulder. She wore a dark brown exomis, a one-shouldered man's garment, shabby and sad. Just holding the spear brought the memories alive again, and so she quickly tied the lance to her leather belt, rose and turned away from the shoreline. but something caught her eye, halting her. It was a strange incident, the kind that is conspicuous for its irregularity. Like a drunk man behaving himself out there amidst the sea haze, a galley cut through the waves, one of hundreds. But this boat was not taking round the distant headlines and into Corinthian Gulf. Instead, it was coming straight across the water towards Cephalonia. Her eyes narrowed and beheld the white sail, or more specifically, the staring, grimacing Gorgon head embezzled upon it. It was a most hideous depiction, discolored grey-green lips peeled back to reveal fangs, the eyes glowing like hot coils, while the nest of snakes that served as the creature's hair seemed to writhe with every lungful of wind that buffeted the sails. She stared at the terrifying Mayan for a time, the legend of Medusa stirring from the depths of memory. Once a beautiful and strong woman, betrayed and cursed by the gods, a morsel of empathy rose and fell within her, like a spark from a fire. But there was something else. She could not see anything of the crew of the strange boat, but she was certain, that she was being watched from those docks. For a moment the pleasant coolness of the sea sprayed and wind became unwelcome, chilling. Spartan children must never be afraid of the dark, of the cold, or of the unknown. A voice drawled from buried memory. His voice. She spat into the sand, turning away from the sea and the strange boat. The taunting memories of her father's teachings were all that remained of her once proud family. Passing traders had brought with their bleak tales of a broken house of Leonidas. Marine bereaved had taken her own life, they said, driven to death by the loss of not just one but both of her children, because of what I did that night, she thought. She strode from the beach, through the dunes and the wind-bent barren grass, and picked her way up a rocky path. This brought her onto a small promontory overlooking the coast, and the simple stone shelter that was her home. The white plastered walls shimmered in the sunlight. The poles and pegged rags that served as an awning, awning of sorts, creaked and flapped in the gentle wind, and the lone olive tree nearby rustled and swayed. Green finches, that's the word, right? Yeah, green finches pecked at a pool of lying water near a broken stone column, chirping in song. A good few hours' walk from the shore town of Sami, days could pass here with little contact from passers-by. The perfect place for a woman to live out her time and die alone, she mused. She paused to twist back towards the sea again, gazing into the distance and the faraway blur of the mainland. How might things have been, she wondered, had the past not been so cruel? She turned... Sorry, there's something in my throat. She turned back to her home, ducking under the low lintel to enter the constant sea breeze falling away to nothing. She glanced around the single room, a wooden bed, a table, a hunting bow, a chest of simple things, a broken ivory comb, and an old cloak. There was no cage around Kephalonia's shores, nor shackles upon her limbs, but poverty was her keeper. None but the rich men of this island could ever hope to leave. She sat on a stool by the table, pouring a cup of water from a clay crater, then unwrapping the hide package she had prepared earlier. A small loaf of bread, hard as a pebble, a finger-sized strip of salted hare meat, and a little clay pot containing 3 small olives stared up at her. A pathetic meal. Her belly howled in protest, demanding to know where the rest was. She looked up and through a small window at the back of her home, seeing the recently dug hole in the ground. Until yesterday, her storage pit had held 2 sacks of wheat and a full salted hare, a round of goats, cheese, and a dozen dried figs, enough for 5 or 6 days' nourishment. Then she had returned from yesterday's fruitless fishing session to see 2 thugs stealing away into the distance with those provisions. They had a good half-mile head start on her, and she was too hungry to give chase in any case, and so she had lain down to sleep with an empty belly last night. Absently, she ran the pad of her thumb around the edge of Leonidas' spear, honed to perfection. Sorry about that. Okay. She felt the top layer of skin split and hissed the name of her present tormentor, the one who had sent the thieves. Curse you to the fire, Cyclops. Turning back to her meagre meal, or meager meal, M-E-A-G-R-E. She took the bread, dipping it in a little oil to soften it, then lifting it to her mouth. A further belly groan stopped her, but not her own. She looked at the doorway. The girl standing there stared at the pathetic loaf as a man might eye a tonic of gold. Phoebe, Cassandra said, I haven't seen you for days. Oh, don't mind me, Cass. Cass? I've never heard her say Cass in the game. K-A-S-S. Phoebe said, examining her dirt-caked fingernails, tucking her dark tresses of hair behind her ears and fidgeting with the frayed hem of her grubby off-white stola. Cassandra turned from the girl to the loaf to the sill of the window, where a dark shape fluttered into view. Icarus gave her the same wide-eyed look of hope, his affections directed towards the silver of salted hair. No, me, she heard when Icarus screeched. With an unconvincing smile, she pushed back from the table, tossing the meat to Icarus and the bread loaf to Phoebe. The pair were transformed into garnets at the moment, each devouring their meager meal with relish. I'm going to say it's meager. I'm pretty sure it's meager. Phoebe, Athenian-born and orphaned, was just 12. Cassandra had first come across the girl begging in the streets near Sammy 3 years ago. She had given her a few coins that day on her way into town. On the way back, she had lifted the mitt, or whatever it is, and carried her home, feeding her and letting her sleep in the shelter. Watching her reminded Cassandra of times past, of distant memories, of that soft, gentle heat within, of that long-ago snuffed-out flame inside. Not love, she assured herself. I would never be so weak again. She sighed, standing and slinging on her bow, and lifting a leather water skin. Come, let us eat while we walk, she said, taking the olives and popping them onto her mouth. The soft, sultry flesh and rich oil were tantalizing, awakening her taste buds, but doing little to satiate her hunger. Unless we want this to be the last meal we eat, we should go visit Marcos, the scumbag, she added inwardly as she strapped on her leather bracelets. It's time to call in some debts. Just give me a minute here. Where was I? They headed south following a sun-beaten track that hugged the coastal bluffs for a while. Before bending inland, the heat grew strong as noon approached, and they cut across a meadow freckled with violas, the air rich with the scent of oregano and wild lemon groves. The long grass stroked her calves. Butterflies flitted across their path in flashes of crimson, amber, and blue. Cicadas, C-I-C-A-D-A-S, Kissidus, or I don't know, chirped in the heat, and for all the world, the war and the past couldn't have been more distant until they bypassed and overlooked Sammy, or Samai, whatever you want to call it. The poor town was an unwalled warren of shacks and simple, white-painted homes surrounding a raised mound of marble villas. Rich men chattered and supped wine on the roofs and verandas. Horses and bare-chested, sweat-slicked workers toiled in the tight lands and bustling market, hauling olive crops and pine logs towards the docks. There, transported vessels jostled, J-O-S-T-L-E-D, jostled for space at the pale stone wharf where the materials were to be conveyed to the Athenian military shipyards and supply warehouses. Bells pealed, whips snapped, iron music rose, and so too did pale twists of scented smoke from the temples. Cassandra entered the town only when she needed to, for food or supplies she could not obtain in other ways. And to carry out jobs Marcos had lined up for her. A Mystios they called her, a mercenary. Sometimes to carry messages, sometimes to escort shipments of stolen goods, more often though to do what so few could. Her heart hardened as she thought of her most recent assignment to a dockside den where a group of notorious bandits were hiding out. The Leonidas spear had been stained red that dark night, and the air fouled by the smell of torn guts. Every slaying was like a prickly seed of guilt that took root deep within. But nothing she had done for Marcos compared to the twisted, gnarled oaks sown on that night of her youth on the edge of the abyss, and the two deaths that had changed her life forever. She shook her head to prevent the memories from taking hold, and thought instead of her empty purse Marcos had yet again wriggled out of paying her when she had returned to report her successful efforts at the dockside hideout. How much did he owe her? She felt a heartless rising. He's a scumbag, a crook, a filthy. Another memory staggered across her spiraling thoughts. Her first moments on this green island 20 years ago. The day Marcos had found her on the stone beach north of the town, washed up beside her broken raft. She remembered his pity-oiled features and curly, greasy black hair as he beheld her. "You are a strange-looking fish," he chuckled, patting her back as she vomited gutfuls and lungfuls of seawater. He had fed her for a time, but seemed eager to be rid of her, until he noticed how nimble and strong she was. "Who in all Helos trained you to move like that? I could use someone like you," he had remarked. The thoughts faded as Sammy fell into the distance behind them. Phoebe skipped ahead, looking up at the soaring Icarus while flying a tiny wooden eagle of her own, making screeching noises. When they came to a fork in the track, Phoebe raced out down the rightmost tine. When nearly there, she chirped over her shoulder. Cassandra gazed after her, perplexed. That route led towards Mount Ainos. An imperious sun-bleached statue towered up on those rocky heights. Zeus, god of the sky, crouched on one knee, holding a thunderbolt in his raised hand. The soils ringing the lower slopes with enriched. The soils ringing the lower slopes were enriched with minerals, washed down during the rains, and so terraced vineyards decorated the base of the mountain, each lined with green vines, silvery stone storehouses, and small red-tilted villas. "Don't be a goat, Phoebe," Cassandra called after her, gesturing to the leftmost track. Marcos's place is further on, near the southern cove end. Her words trailed off when she saw Phoebe speed onto the nearest vineyard. The estate had always been there, but the figure down by the crops in the green and white cloak had not. "Marcos," she whispered. "He asked me not to tell you," Phoebe said when Cassandra caught up with her on the vineyard's edge. "I'm sure he did," Cassandra burred. B-U-R-R-E-D. "Stay here." She stole past two workers pruning the crops on the lowest terrace. They didn't even notice her approach or Phoebe following in her wake, disobedient as always. As she crept through the vines, she heard Marcos bickering with a worker who clearly knew better. He started, then paused to stifle a hiccup. "We will grow grapes as big as melons," he insisted, before throwing back his head and taking a long pull on what was evidently the skin of barely washed wine. "You'll kill the vine, Master Marcos," the worker reasoned, tilting his broad-brimmed sun hat back. "We can't allow the fruit to grow this year or next year, or the stems will bend and snap." The third year will be the time for the first harvest. Years, Marcos spluttered. How in Hades am I supposed to pay back? He fell silent when Cassandra emerged from the vines. Ah, Cassandra, he beamed, throwing his arms out wide, nearly backhanding the well-meaning worker. You brought a vineyard, Marcos? Only the finest wines for us from now on, my girl. He purred, spinning on the spot to gesture all around, nearly losing his footing. Phoebe, darting in and out of the vines, nearly tittered, then set off again after Icarus. Icarus began to screech, agitated, but Cassandra's mind was on other matters. I don't want your grapes or your wine, Marcos, Cassandra insisted. Phoebe and I need food, clothing, bedding. I want the drachme you owe me. Marcos shrank a little then, fiddling with the mouth of his wineskin. Ah, ever the Mystios, he chuckled nervously. Well, you see, there will be a short delay in getting those coins for you. A short 3 years by the sound of it, Cassandra said flatly. She shot a look up at the circling Icarus, now screeching madly. A rising sense of unease nagged at her. The eagle did not usually become this agitated when playing with Phoebe. When the grapes become wine, Marcos interrupted her thoughts, I will have the money aplenty, my dear. First, I must make sure I pay back my loan for this place. I'm slightly behind on the payment, you see. Quite, said the nearby worker absently as he returned to snipping and tying vines. And the Cyclops doesn't like late payments. Marco shot a wild, scolding look at the man's back. You borrowed money from the Cyclops? Cassandra gasped, stepping back from Marcus as if he were riddled with pox. This, she gestured around them, was funded by him? You have bought yourself a nightmare, Marcos. Are you a fool? She glared around at the shimmering green-gold slopes of Mount Inus, concerned about how far her voice had carried. The Cyclops' men ransacked my stores last night. He hates me already. He's killed scores of men on this island and has put a price on my head. He knows you and I work together. To him we are equally indebted. If you fall short of your payments, then I will be one of the first to suffer. Not quite, a gruff voice said behind them both. Cassandra swung round to the forest of vines. Two strangers stood there, grins stretched across their faces. One with a face like a steeped-on pear held a fear-frozen Phoebe, clasping a hand over her mouth and holding a dagger to her throat. This is a lot different from the game. Cassandra now recognized the duo, the ones who had funded her storage pit last night. Icarus, why didn't I listen to you? She chided herself, seeing the eagle still circling, shrieking in alarm. Try anything and the girl's throat will be opened, said the second man, patting a short sword against the palm of his free hand. His burrow jutting like a cliff, casting his eyes in shadow. Marcos has run up quite a debt, but so have you, Mystios. You've hauled one of my master's boats. You've killed a convoy of his men, friends of mine. So how about you come along with us, eh? Settle matters to my master's satisfaction. Cassandra felt the blood freeze in her veins. She knew that to go with them would mean death for her and slavery at best for Phoebe, but to resist might mean death for them all here and now. A tense moment passed and Cassandra did not move. Seems the Mystios is not keen on coming quietly, Shadow Bro growled. Let's show her we mean business. Cassandra's heart froze. What's your opponent? Nicolaus hissed from the midst of her past. Their eyes will betray their intentions before they even make a move. She saw the thug holding Phoebe roll his eyes down towards the girl, and his dagger hand knuckles whitened. It all happened in a single, visceral reflex. She lunged forward, simultaneously clasping and pulling the roped spear from her belt, and lashing it forth like a whip. The flat of the ancient lance had licked up and whacked into the thug's temple. The man's eyes rolled in their sockets. Blood trickled from his nostrils, and he crumpled like a kicked-over stack of bricks. Phoebe staggered away, weeping. Cassandra yanked the spear rope, catching the lance by the haft this time, holding it like a true hoplite might. Shadowbro held her gaze, shuffled, fainting left, then plunging right with a roar. Cassandra drew her weight onto one foot to let the foe hurl past, and when he skidded and came back for her, she fell to her haunches and slashed her spear across his belly. He stumbled on a few steps, then glanced down, confused as a writhing mass of blue-grey gut ropes slipped and slithered out into the night light to slap down upon the dusty ground. He looked at the cavity that remained of his belly, then up at Marcos and Cassandra with a perplexed grin before falling face first into the ground. By the balls of Zeus, Marcos wailed, wringing his hands through his greasy curls and falling to his knees as he gulped at the two corpses. Cyclops will kill me for certain now. Cassandra hugged the weeping Phoebe tight, kissing the top of her head, drawing her hands over the girl's ears to shield her from the discussion. We'll bury the bodies. Nobody will know what became of them. But he will find out, Marcos groaned. You must learn. Today you cut 2 heads from a beast, but 4 will sprout to take their place, and the Cyclops' rage will be tripled like any tyrant. You must either obey him utterly or destroy him completely, don't you see? He swiped a dismissive hand. I am no tutor. Perhaps one day you will find a better one, and perhaps you had better set down that wineskin and let your head heal. You need to find a way to pay the Cyclops back. Marcos's bulging eyes surged at Eva before him, his face gradually slackening in despair. Then, as if struck by an invisible lightning bolt, he jolted, rising to his feet, stomping over to seize Cassandra by the shoulders, shaking her. That's it, there is a way. Cassandra shrugged him off. A way to earn a sack full of silver on this island? I doubt that. Marcus's eyes tapping. Not silver, my dear. Obsidian. Cassandra stared at him blankly. Think, what does the Cyclops value most? His man, his land, his ship? No, his obsidian eye. He tapped madly under one of his own. It's even veined with gold. We steal the eye, we sell it somewhere on the mainland, maybe or to passing traders. Then we have our sack full of silver, enough to pay off my vineyard, enough to pay you what I owe you, to feed Phoebe, he yelled, delighted at having found an altruistic rationale at last. We steal the Cyclops' eye. He never wears it, it's too valuable. He keeps it in his home. His home is like a fortress, she said dryly, thinking of the well-watched den on a small peninsula that sprouted from the west of the island. Scamandrios was the last person to try and break in there. He has never been seen since. Both paused to reflect on the weasel-like Mystios, Scamandrios, thinking of 100 possible fates he might have suffered. Burning, flaying, and gradual dismemberment were some of the Cyclops' preferred methods of dispatching his foes. Scamandrios was hardly a great loss to society, but he had prided himself on his stealth and quickness, the shadow some had called him. Cassandra shook her head clear, but getting back to the point, we steal his eye. Marcos cowered a little and shrugged pathetically. You are the Mystios, my dear. I would only slow you down. For this to work, it is vital that you are not spotted. I am rather more concerned that he will catch me, Cassandra said. He will not catch you, for he is not at his den, Marcos wagged a finger. As you know, almost every private gallery on this island has been summoned to join the Athenian fleet. The Andrastia is one of the last vessels left. The Cyclops is out on the hunt, and that galley is his prey. He has some grudge with the ship's Triarches? Triearchos. Triarchos, I hear. Phoebe wriggled free from Cassandra. What's happening? She asked. Nothing, my young girl, Marcus answered first. Cassandra and I were just discussing how much money I owe her. She just has one last job to do for me, and then she will have it all. Isn't that right, my dear? He asked Cassandra. Then can we eat like queens night after night? Phoebe asked. Aye, Cassandra said quietly, stroking Phoebe's hair. Excellent, Marcos purred. You will stay here tonight and enjoy a full meal. Fried mullet, octopus, freshly baked loaves, yogurt, honey, and pistachios, and several craters of wine, and then a comfortable bed and a good rest. Tomorrow you can be on your way. Then he whispered so Phoebe would not hear. And remember, you must not be seen, or the three of us will be. He drew a finger to his throat and stuck out his tongue. Cassandra refused to let Marcos out of her cell stare. Alright, so that's the end of chapter 1, and tomorrow will be chapter 2. Hope you all enjoyed reading it, and I'm also going to be making a new Life is Strange Theory video soon. Alright, this is TotalGamerJunkie, signing off.